Good morning, everybody. Welcome, all of you, on the conference about Croatian accession in the context of the future functioning of the Schengen area. I will be your moderator for today. My name is Filip Dragovic. I used to work in the Ministry of the Interior for 20 years. Now I'm independent consultant and the president of the Institute for Security Policy in Zagreb, and I'm really happy to moderate this conference because this topic is one of the most important challenge for EU and the citizen of the EU. The accession of Croatia to European Union was and it's still a successful story. And the accession to the Schengen is another step because the Schengen area and Euro are two most visible achievements of the European accession process. Croatia did a lot of work to fulfill technical requirements, and this is confirmed by the Commission in 2011. Let me welcome you, Mr. Klaus Fiesinger, Regional Director for Southeast Europe, for his opening remarks.
Thank you very much. Hvala vam. Dobar dan svima. Of the Institute of the Croatian Institute of Development and International Relations, and on behalf of Hans Seidel Foundation Zagreb office, I would like to welcome you all to this online conference and virtual round table to today's Schengen topic. In advance, I would like to thank all speakers, all panelists, the moderator, and of course also Mr. Knezovic, who will give us some brief presentation of the study. Unfortunately, we can't meet personally, so we must use the technical equipment, and thanks to the technicians. This topic today, Croatian accession to Schengen area, is, so to speak, some finalization of this year's conference, which we had together. We had some conference about Croatia according position to the Western Balkans, and then also some conference Croatia's EU presidencies. And this is also, so to speak, some continuation of former years' common projects which analyzed and evaluated if and how small powers are able to act in international affairs. And in one of these conferences and studies, we came to the conclusion that there are, for small powers, two decisive elements necessary, namely coalition and specification. Coalition, in that sense, means to build synergies in alliances, and specification, that some small state is able and ready to overtake specific tasks in order to contribute to common welfare and common security. And these states are not only consumers but providers. And this is the topic because, as it was just said, Croatia is ready and able to overtake and to practice the mechanism of Schengen application standards, as we see it at the Croatian-Bosnian border. From one side, very much blamed because of the pushbacks, from the other side, praised for its accuracy. In October 2019, European Commission gave some green light for the accession, but as the time shows, between there has not very much happened. Of course, there was mentioned several times some point of accession, but as we see, the European Union is very reluctant about this. We see it also according to Bulgaria and Romania, who entered the European Union just years before Croatia. So we will see how the things are going on. I think there is much to discuss and to analyze from the political sector, from the aspect of justice, and also from a technical aspect. So I give back to the moderator. Hvala vam na pažnji.
Thank you, Mr. Wiesinger, for this opening remarks, and it was really excellent introduction in the discussion. I will now give floor to Mr. Sandro Knezovic, research advisor from Institute for Development and International Relation, who will give the overview of his research. The topic was Croatian answer respecting the concerns about preparedness for becoming a full-fledged Schengen member. Mr. Knezovic, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed. First of all, I would like to thank our traditional partner, Zagreb office of Hans Seidel Stiftung, that has recognized the importance of the topic and joined forces with us to undertake the research about the current challenges to Schengen area, and also a more specific topic about Croatian path towards full Schengen membership, opportunities and challenges in this regard. The idea was to prepare a study that is a reader-friendly and that can be an interesting and useful read, not only for policymakers, but also for journalists, students, and all other who are interested in this multidimensional and increasingly relevant topic. My task is here to be as brief and concise as possible and to present you just the main factographic things about the study, its structure, its substance, and perhaps offer some viable conclusions. The fundamental idea behind this study is the following. The EU integration is a complex and multifaceted process that does not end with the formal accession of the candidate state to the European Union. It just acquires a different dynamic and is being continued in somewhat different environments. There are numerous examples to that. However, two of them seem to stand out. The first one is accession to the Eurozone, and the second one is the process of accession to the Schengen area. This study focuses on the second issue, and it attempts to unravel its complexity and peculiarity, especially in the contemporary European and international security environment that is becoming increasingly complex and marked with increasing amount of tensions and uncertainty. In order to be comprehensive and useful to policymakers and other potential readers of this study, the body of the text has been divided into three fundamental chapters. The first one deals with the institutional framework and its development from the formal initiation onwards in an attempt to critically assess all strengths and weaknesses of the construct called Schengen area. The second chapter analyzes contemporary challenges to viable functionality of the regime. In more practical terms, it precisely deals with 2015 migrant crisis and 2019 ongoing COVID pandemic. The third one, however, focuses specifically on Croatia's attempt to become a full-fledged member of the Schengen area, its current developments and challenges that lay ahead, with an attempt to offer modest implementable recommendations. In details, the first chapter deals with the development and gradual institutionalization of the idea, of the very idea of the free movement of persons in Europe. In the very first phase, it actually recognized the fact that the idea of the free movement has been embedded in the very core of the European integration process. And therefore, regardless of the fact that the Schengen zone was initially built out of the EU policy framework due to political, practical reasons, it became its integral part rather soon. Even more, besides the EU enlargement, it soon became one of the most successful policies of the European Union, contributing to its overall legitimacy at the broader international scale. The gradual development of the Schengen regime and its incorporation into EU policy framework significantly also contributes to its overall legitimacy, which is visible from the fact that Schengen as a concept became increasingly attractive to other, both EU and non-EU member states, and this we witnessed through different stages of enlargement of Schengen. Let me remind you of the fact that not only the EU members are full members of Schengen. Especially the enlargement to former socialist state was carrying a great symbolic significance due to the fact that it actually represented one of the final stages of the practical unification of European continent in the post-Cold War period. However, as in any other EU policy field, not everything was rosy with the development of Schengen regime, and as well as other EU policy fields had to tackle with different crises. The two most significant I mentioned before, 2015 migrant crisis and 2019 COVID, and this precisely is in focus of our second chapter. We attempt to analyze the way crisis impacts Schengen and what were challenges and opportunities in the way EU responds to them. The chapter offers a critical assessment of the EU capacity to tackle the crisis. It deals with this fundamental issue of balance between community and intergovernmental decision-making, in particular in crisis situation, and tries to offer some viable recommendations for the period to come. The third chapter, as I previously said, focuses exclusively on a process of Croatian accession to Schengen area, and it attempts to assess the country's capacity to undertake not only the fruits of the membership, but also the responsibility of the full-fledged membership is in such a distinct regime. The chapter also tries to assess current political and security environment in which we try to contemplate Croatian accession to Schengen and to put it in the wider regional and European security context. In conclusion, this study recognizes the fact that whatever problems are, actually Schengen has been, and it is, one of the most visible positive developments and achievements of the entire European integration process. But also the study attempts to realistically highlight existing problems and challenges to its sustainable functionality and future enlargements. It is clear that the Schengen membership brings numerous benefits, in particular for the country of shape and capacity like Croatia, especially due to its specific geostrategic location. Today, perhaps the climate for enlargement is not perfect. However, the EU has proved capacity over the last decades to cope with the crisis, and this crisis is neither first or not the last that the EU will cope with. It should not stop it from continuing the expansion of the European area of free movement to the countries that are capable of showing capacity to respect the membership criteria. As I said, the study was written in an informative, illustrative and reader-friendly manner, and we therefore hope that it will become an interesting and useful read, not only to policymakers, but also to members of academic community, journalists, students, and all other interested. With this, I will stop. I just wanted to give you a brief presentation of the structure of the study, and I'm very much looking forward to the debate and question and answers and comments. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Mr. Knezovic, for this presentation of your research, and I'm still hoping that we will have a lot of questions in the discussion later on. So before we start on the session, let me thanks again once again to Mr. Fiesinger and Sandro for opening the conference and giving some more detailed information for the discussion. Following the agenda, let me say that Hans Seidel Foundation and Institute for the Development and the Institutional Relation, including myself, are convening an online discussion with our distinguished speaker, and I will try to shortly present them before I give speech to any of them. Mr. Plamen Pantev, he will be the first speaker. He graduated of Sofia University, St. Clement Ohridski Law School, hold PhD in International Relation and International Law, and he is now professor at the same university. He is also founder and director of the Institute for Security and International Studies in Sofia. He graduated of the senior executive course of Marshall Center for European Security Studies, and he is author of 20 books and more than 150 academic publications and member of numerous international bodies. The second speaker is Mrs. Iris Goldner-Lang. He's a Jean Monnet professor at EU Law at the University of Zagreb, Faculty of Law. She is one of the academic coordinators of the Jean Monnet Center of Excellence, EU Global Leadership in the Rule of Law, and the holder of the UNESCO Chair of Free Movement of People, Migration and Intercultural Dialogue, also member of Steering Committee of the UNESCO Unit for Bioethics and Law at the University of Zagreb. She is president of the Croatian Society of European Law. She is also editor of 3 books and author of number of articles, chapters, and books. The third speaker is Mr. Robert Baric. He is assistant professor at the Faculty of Political Science, Zagreb, where he has been a faculty member since February 2019. Hold PhD in international security and international relation. Prior to this, between 1993 and 2019, he was a member of Croatian Armed Force, and he was a member of Republic of Croatia military representation of the NATO and the EU in Brussels. Prior to the mentioned duties, Mr. Baric has been assistant advisor for the defense affairs in the office of President. He has been a lecturer of Croatia Armed Force, associate lecturer on Faculty of Political Science, and also lecturer and Faculty of Humanities and Social Science, University of Zagreb. So now I will give floor to Mr. Plamen Pantev to present the challenges to contemporary Schengen zone, a Bulgarian view. Mr. Pantev, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning. And first of all, allow me to congratulate Irmo and Dr. Sandro Knezovic for this important publication and for the present timely event, the accession of Croatia to the Schengen area. And directly to the point, what is the Bulgarian view from my perspective? Bulgaria's integration in the European Union was a formal fact on January the 1st, 2007. It marked the end of a long and constructive period of transformation of Bulgarian society, internalizing democratic values and redefining geopolitical responsibilities as a NATO and EU member. According to the Accession Treaty of Bulgaria to the European Union, it's Article 4 of the Protocol of the Conditions and Agreement of Integrating Bulgaria in the Union, the accession to the Schengen legal regime is an obligation Sofia has to get prepared for and to implement. Once the European Council reaches consensus on the realization by Bulgaria of the requirements to apply all parts of the Schengen regime, the country will become a member of this regime. Dr. Knežević in his publication is right that sharing responsibilities in the field of security as free movement in the Schengen area leads to raising lots of eyebrows in the national capitals of the European Union member states and complicates the decision-making process, turning it into a very difficult task. As many other issues in the EU family of nations, the agreement about exercising regime-based border control, border management, information exchange and coordination is prone to negotiations. As a principle and according to the European Union membership philosophy, these negotiations are problem-solving, not bargaining negotiations. What happened to Bulgaria in this regard? With the years of cooperative activity to get prepared to the requirements of the membership in the Schengen area regime, listening carefully and realizing appropriate recommendations from a few EU Schengen area countries, the raising of eyebrows stopped, with one only exception: the Netherlands. The present problems of Bulgaria concerning its accession to the Schengen zone are not the broad range of technical capacities the country needs to possess. The security expert community in the European Union, especially the practitioners in the Schengen member states, know well how reliable and effective partner Bulgaria is, including as a Frontex participant. Presently, Bulgaria utilizes the whole Schengen system needed to fight terrorism, smuggling, drug trafficking. Sofia has 100% exchange of information with the German and all the other European Union member states and European Union specialized security services. Furthermore, Bulgaria has a bilateral agreement with Turkey, a precious diplomatic asset not only for Sofia, but for all European Union members. The bilateral agreement works effectively, and despite the millions of refugees in our southeastern neighbor, Bulgaria has close to zero migrant flow from Turkey. It's a fact. Almost every day, Bulgaria brings back to Greece migrants, sometimes around 100. And this is important to note because the threat perception in the Netherlands is that Bulgarian-Greek bilateral issue may lead to migrant pressure on the Dutch border once Bulgaria joins the Schengen area. For Bulgaria, this is an unacceptable argument, though the Dutch government, with its delicate political and parliamentary balance and the far-right party, it's the PVV, the Party for Freedom, as the second biggest party in the Dutch parliament with extreme positions on immigration, dresses this argument with the unsubstantiated and banal claims of corruption and the need to add additional systems to fight human traffic. And this was diplomatically stated during the last visit of the Dutch foreign minister in June 2019 to Bulgaria, Stef Blok. In both aspects, fighting corruption and fighting human traffic, Bulgaria is performing effectively after introducing a few years ago additional legal and institutional instruments. A high level of coordination among the security services and an active specialized institution for fighting corruption, headed by a highly expert former general prosecutor, led to the conclusion, first, by the European Commission, next, the European Parliament, third, the governments of the individual members of the Schengen area, but the Netherlands, that Bulgaria is completely prepared to join the Schengen regime. I need to add how significant the support of Bavaria, in addition to the one of the federal government of Germany, for Bulgaria is on its difficult path to acceding to the Schengen area. Why so? Because we rate high the value of the Bavarian and German threat perception of a migrant pressure originating from Bulgaria, especially when compared to the perception of a presumable and eventual pressure of migrants from Bulgaria on the Dutch border. Of course, with all due respect to our Dutch friends and allies, many of them my personal friends. Similar to the Bavarian and German position is the one of the Austrian government, supporting Sophia's joining of the Schengen zone. And we know well how close to the issues of Southeast Europe, Austria and its government are. One more argument. Consider President Macron's suggestion of reforming the Schengen Agreement. A major argument is the need to better regulate the migrant pressure originating from Spain and Italy, not Bulgaria. Today, we are in a period when we do not any longer need support. We just need accession to the Schengen area. By the way, Bulgaria also has its concerns, perceptions, and questions to our Dutch friends in the area of security. What is the meaning of selling marijuana with H or with J, marijuana, in small quantities in drugstores in the Netherlands? Why, where, and how? Big quantities need to be collected and stored for distribution and selling in small quantities around the Netherlands drugstores. Is not that a security risk and threat for the rest of the European Union member states, participants or not in the Schengen area? Anyway, discussing the migrant issue is important, as it constitutes one of the biggest challenges to the presently functioning and getting outdated Schengen legal regime. Lastly, I would like to note how important is discussing and finding a united European Union formula of dealing with the problems of the Schengen legal regime as drafted by President Emmanuel Macron and Chancellor Sebastian Kurz, supported by Chancellor Angela Merkel. Rethinking of the fight on terrorism in Europe from the standpoint of the regulation of the external and internal security issues. Reconsidering the migrant pressure from the same relationship of external and internal protection of Europe. How to deal with situations like the one COVID-19 presented to us this year. Finding the right dependence between the external and internal security needs of the European Union will have a methodological effect on the necessary reform of the Schengen legal regime, born once in the quiet, rich in wineries, and with the beautiful castle Luxembourgish village of Schengen. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Pante, for this excellent remarks from your side. I will just point out few very important thing what you mentioned. Sharing responsibility. This is really the crucial topic when we are talking about the cooperation between security agencies, and the importance of the implementation of the all Schengen requirements. And you mentioned a lot of different areas, because we cannot forget that the Schengen cooperation is not only the border control and migration issues. So we are dealing also with fighting organized crime, corruption, terrorism. And at the end of your presentation, you mentioned also one very important areas. This is the how to achieve balance between the internal and external security policies, and this is maybe the biggest challenge for the EU. Thank you, Mr. Pante, once again. I will now leave floor to Ms. Iris Goldner-Lang to give her presentation about reflection upon principle of solidarity and the desirable future framework of EU migration and asylum law. Please, floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Let me share my screen with you. Okay. Can you see the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, everything's fine.
Okay, thank you. So, hello, good morning, everybody. So before I embark on my talk, I would first like to thank Hans Seidel Stiftung for the invitation, and my particular thanks goes to the head of the Zagreb office, Ms. Alexandra Markic-Boban, who always takes the lead in organizing excellent events on highly relevant and timely issues like this one. And as you can see, the title of my presentation is Schengen, Implications of COVID-19 Migration Influx and the New Migration Pact. And in the next 15 minutes, my aim is to show that Croatia will not accede to the same Schengen as the one that was envisaged in 1985 and 1990, and the one that we had 10 or 20 years ago, and that this is due to the fact that in the past 5 years, Schengen has undergone a number of existential crises, which are challenging its future functioning, the most significant being the migration influx, COVID-19, and terrorist threats. And for all these reasons, the future of Schengen is to a certain level uncertain. And in this context, I would like to look at the new Migration Pact as the Commission's attempt to safeguard the future of Schengen. Now, the structure of my presentation is the following. I would like to concentrate on two most frequent recent grounds for temporary reintroduction of border controls within the otherwise border control-free Schengen area. I would like to look at the impact of the migration influx on Schengen and of COVID-19 and public health restrictions on Schengen. And then finally, I would like to look at the impact of Migration Pact on Schengen and in particular on Croatia. Now, as regards my first point, the impact of migration or refugee influx on Schengen, I've put some data for you on this slide. So I've taken a certain point in time in 2015-2016 refugee influx and looked at the number of Schengen states who at that time had reintroduced internal border controls. What you can see is that the number of states at that time was considerable. And this, this was changing over the course of that year or two, but you can really see that at that time, quite a significant number of Schengen states reintroduced internal border control so that we can actually talk about the suspension of Schengen as it was initially conceived. On top of that, a number of Schengen states imposed very strict external border controls towards both third countries and non-Schengen EU states. The example would be, for example, what was going on in Hungary on its border with Serbia and with Croatia. And also a lot of them imposed border fences, again, like Hungary. Now, I would like to move to my second point, and that's the impact of COVID-19 on Schengen. And first, let me just briefly identify the COVID-19 mobility restrictions in the EU. So, as we all know, in March 2020, almost all EU member states unilaterally imposed mobility-related measures, and they drastically restricted cross-border movement in the EU. They enforced lockdowns, which included both interstate and intrastate non-essential movements, and they also closed their external borders towards third countries for most non-residents. Now, what I find particularly interesting is that all mobility restrictions were adopted nationally. So all mobility restrictions were not first discussed and agreed upon at the level at the EU. They were not coordinated. The European Commission was initially reserved to what was going on, but soon they had to yield under pressure and the reality. And they started adopting a set of non-binding soft law measures aimed at coordinating national measures. Now, the only exception to the general approach of member states' unilateral adoption of mobility restrictions without first trying to reach an agreement at the EU level was the closure of external borders towards third countries. It was first agreed by the European Council, meaning all EU member states, and then implemented by each member state separately. And the closure of external borders was accompanied by a spectrum of national measures restricting migrants and refugees' rights. And this all led to a temporary halt in the registration and lodging of asylum applications in a number of member states. The limited access to EU member states' asylum systems resulted in a drastic lowering of the number of asylum claims, which hit the lowest level since 2008 and represented, as you can see on this slide, an 87% decrease in comparison to the numbers in January and February 2020. Now, as regards the measures impacting movement of EU citizens in the European Union, two groups of measures can be identified. First, most Schengen states imposed border checks on their intra-Schengen borders. And by July the 15th this year, 17 out of 26 Schengen states reintroduced internal border controls. And I checked the data again this week, and there are currently 9 Schengen states which are having internal border controls. 4 of them due to the pandemic, due to secondary movements, meaning migration movements, and 3 due to terrorist threats. But these numbers are constantly changing. In addition, non-Schengen EU member states such as Croatia strengthened their border controls towards neighboring EU member states as a kind of a response to the pandemic. Consequently, in spring 2020, the whole European territory stopped being a border control-free area, and this was a strong blow to what was always perceived as one of the most important achievements of European integration. Second, most member states also imposed travel restrictions, suspending passenger transportation on flights, trains, buses, and maritime transport. And they also imposed bans on entry and exit to and from national territories. Now, even though legally speaking, these were not Schengen, but free movement restrictions, so restrictions within the area in the context of the functioning of the EU internal market law, they also impacted the mobility within the Schengen area, and they were often diverse and sometimes inconsistent with each other. Now, what are the possible grounds for limiting both free movement of EU citizens in the EU and entry of third country nationals into the Schengen area? There are basically three of them: public policy, public security or internal security, and public health. Now, member states justified the reintroduction of border controls and the imposition of travel restrictions and bans by COVID-19. And even though one might have thought that COVID-19 is a public health restriction, meaning that it's justified by public health grounds, this seems not to be the case in relation to the reintroduction of the internal border controls within Schengen. Let me explain why. If we look at Articles 25 and 28 of the Schengen Borders Code, these articles tolerate temporary reintroduction of internal border checks in case of a serious threat to public policy or internal security. The code does not mention the reintroduction of internal border controls in case of threats to public health. Nevertheless, in its COVID-19 guidelines for border management measures, the European Commission stated, and I quote, and you have the quote on the slide, member states may reintroduce temporary border controls at internal borders, if justified for reasons of public policy or internal security. In an extremely critical situation, a member state can identify a need to reintroduce border controls as a reaction to the risk posed by a contagious disease. So by this, it seems that the European Commission is actually equating, meaning putting on the same footing, a risk posed by a contagious disease on the one hand to internal security threat on the other hand. Now, what I find particularly interesting is that COVID-19 has forced us to reconsider our understanding of what is a public health restriction, due to the fact that COVID-19 has certain characteristics which differentiate it from other infectious diseases we have known so far. And that consequently, COVID-19 has increased the difference between the conditions for the applicability of public health restrictions on the one hand, when compared to public policy and public security restrictions on the other hand. Let me elaborate on this. Measures taken on grounds of public policy and public security have to be based exclusively on the personal conduct of the individual concerned. They need to be genuine, present, and sufficiently serious. The threat needs to be genuine, present, and sufficiently serious. And it needs to impact one of the fundamental interests of the society. Consequently, these measures cannot be based on general preventive grounds or be automatic or systematic. And they may be taken only following a case-by-case analysis. Now, the question is, are the same criteria of the existence of personal conduct, case-by-case assessment, and inadmissibility of general preventive grounds applicable to the COVID-19 public health restrictions? And my answer is no. COVID-19 has certain symptoms and is transmitted and it spreads in a way which is different from other infectious diseases we have known so far. Consequently, public health restrictions due to COVID-19 could not be based on individual risk assessment. by considering each individual separately based on visible symptoms or the fact that a person has confirmed exposure to coronavirus. As a consequence, COVID-19 has triggered the adoption of much more systematic restrictions, which includes also the reintroduction of the Schengen temporary border controls. And these restrictions encompass millions of individuals without regard to confirmed infections or exposure to coronavirus. The last point and the last slide that I want to talk about in the last minute or two is the impact of the Migration Pact, or the interrelation between Migration Pact and Schengen. So on the 23rd of September 2020, the European Commission proposed the new Pact on Migration and Asylum, with the appended package of 5 legislative proposals of regulations and 4 legally non-binding soft law instruments. And the Commission stated that the aim of the Migration Pact is a reform of the common European asylum system. One of the novelties proposed by the Pact is the reintroduction of border procedures, which would become mandatory for certain categories of third country nationals. In short, border procedures are conceived as a new pre-entry procedure whereby asylum applicants would be assessed without authorizing the applicant's entry into the member state's territory. And in case of a negative decision, a return border procedure would follow immediately. The whole procedure would be taking place at the external borders of the EU member states, including the non-Schengen EU states like Croatia. They would have to be completed within 12 weeks, with an additional 12-week time limit. Now, the introduction of completely new procedures within very short time limitations and strict rules on non-entry are intended to promote efficient migration management and prevent new migration influxes and secondary movement. However, there are quite significant challenges. First, the short time limit poses considerable risks, both in terms of the protection of applicants' rights and the feasibility of the whole procedure, especially in case of a high number of arrivals. And second, the whole border procedure will take place at the external borders, thus requiring the setting up of necessary facilities where all the activities will take place. Consequently, the implementation of border procedures will be highly demanding and costly. And this will mostly fall on shoulders of frontline member states like Croatia. And there is a risk that the whole system might become clogged up and create hotspots, like the ones that we have in Greece. Now, it is questionable whether the Migration Pact will be adopted in the end, and if so, in what form. But as it currently stands, it can be viewed as the Commission's attempt to create a system where mostly the frontline member states will be in charge of controlling migration influxes and preserving Schengen. And this is definitely going to be a very challenging task for member states like Croatia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Goldner-Lang, for this really excellent presentation and overview. And I will just repeat a few very, very important topic what you mentioned, that Schengen is now not the same as in the past. And this is maybe one of the most important thing. Just to remind you, the latest Schengen Border Code was adopted in 2016. The first one was in 2006. The latest regulation on Frontex, which combine Eurosur, is from November 2019. So we are really talking about the new EU legislation. And I think in this COVID situation, you also mentioned one very important items for discussion. This is national influence on the EU decision-making process, which is now very strongly in the working group, etc. Why? Maybe because we are talking about national security, and national security is still in a strong hand of member states. Also, the problem of definitions. Sometimes the EU regulation and other part of acquis are not defining very well the wording. For example, serious threat, how you can measure the serious threat, what are the risks which are falling under the serious threat, but I will let those questions for discussion later on. Maybe the fear from unknown is also one of the trigger what is happening now on the EU and Schengen level. And at the end, the migration. The migration is maybe one of the most challenging area now. And the new package is giving the enormous job for the member states who are keeping the external border. When we are talking about the investment and strengthening the administrative and institutional capacity. So thank you once again. Now I will give floor to Professor Baric. He will give us the presentation on crisis management in Schengen area during the COVID-19 and solutions for possible further lockdowns. Please, Mr. Baric, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. First, I wish to thank organizers for this opportunity to give me possibility to for some remarks and observations about Schengen, not only in this crisis, but in general. Forthcoming Croatian, I hope, soon accession to the Schengen agreement is also opportunity for some serious considerations of issues critical for the future of the Schengen agreement. Up to now, the Schengen and the free movement of people are considered one of the key achievements of the European Union. The Schengen regime is also an example of flexible integration because it accepts non-EU members, as well it gives special rules for individual member states. Despite its achievements, the future of Schengen is topic of intense speculation in the last 10 years. Why? Because in the last 10 years we had 3 major crises connected with Schengen. First, it was 2011, consequences of Arab Spring. Then 2015-16, we heard about migration crisis for whole EU, and now ongoing COVID pandemic crisis. Despite the gloom predictions of the possible failure, and even predictions that EU would fail if Schengen failed, up to now Schengen is showing remarkable resilience. But this doesn't mean that Schengen is trouble-free. To understand current problems of the Schengen agreement, it's necessary to trace those problems to its roots. Flaws and inconsistencies in the Schengen can be tracked back to the way in which national and EU competences have been delimited at the moment of the creation of the agreement. Schengen was based on the Article 13 of the Single European Act, then the conclusions of the Fontainebleau Presidency in 1984, and recommendations of the European Commission. Those documents gave the goal of creating internal market of the EU by 1992 as an area without internal frontiers in which the free movement of goods, persons, services, and capital was to be ensured. But what happened? From the start, there was disagreement between member states about implementing this goal. Regarding to the border control, the UK refused to accept transfer of the border control to the supranational framework. This disagreement forced initial development of the Schengen outside of the then European community legal framework. Five member states who favored closer integration decided to create the Schengen Agreement on the basis of general international law, decided in 1985 as an intergovernmental treaty outside the European legal order. During the long period of preparations, the Schengen Agreement finally was implemented in 1995. Additional member states and non-EU states became signatories of the agreement. Finally, in 1997, the Treaty of Amsterdam integrated the Schengen acquis into the EU legal order, together with formerly third pillar EU policies with regard to immigration and asylum. But one critical question was left unresolved. EU measures in the area of border control, the free movement within the Schengen area, visa policy and illegal migration have been considered as extension of the Schengen acquis. But the Schengen acquis don't cover measures regarding the migration, legal or illegal, and asylum rights by third countries outside of the EU. And national concepts of the member states and they desire to keep control of their external border to prevent irregular migration originating outside the EU resulted in opinion of possibility of temporary introducing border controls in the Schengen area with the goal of preventing unwanted migration. So now we have this problem that you didn't have parallel development of the Schengen inside the EU with EU policy towards issues of illegal migration and asylum rights via the third countries. So this is discrepancy which isn't resolved up to now. The next problem, is for the Schengen is structural inequalities between the member states of the Schengen regime. And in the time of crisis, these structural inequalities are causing effects of asymmetrical shocks. Why? Frankly, it's very simple. Look at the borders of the member states of the Schengen regime. Simply put, their geographical locations. Not all of them have external land of sea borders. And of course, some of them are more exposed to the external migration outside of the EU. Best example is difference between Mediterranean member states and the Central European member states of the Schengen Agreement. And in the time of the crisis, simply you have different pressure to the member states, and this was what happened in 2015. Member states at the south, the Mediterranean, were at the full frontal assault of the illegal migrations, but members in the Central Europe were protected. So you see also those differences which are directly undermining the trust between member states regarding the Schengen agreement, and this is also unresolved. Problem is the Schengen regime doesn't have the mechanism for dealing with mentioned problems. Those problems were supposed to be resolved at EU level by developing a general policy on immigration on the basis on Article 80 of the Treaty of the European Union, which requires that EU policies on the border checks, immigration and asylum are governed by principle of solidarity and fair sharing of the responsibility. And this didn't happen. Fall of Dublin Agreement in 2015 and inability of creating a new system showed that the EU member states maintain at national level their protection of the unwanted immigration, and that they are unwilling to transfer the sovereignty to this area of the foreign policy, national security in general. And this is constant problem for the, not only for Schengen regime, but also for the common foreign security policy. Result is system integration in the area of abolishment of internal borders did not develop complementary with the policy of immigration at the EU level. So now we have these three crises. Even before first crisis in 2011, there were a few occasions where for temporary reinstatement of the limited reinstatement of the border checks because of the security reason. In 1995, after the wave of terrorist attack in France, the Paris partially suspended the Schengen regime for a limited time. Then in 2004, during the UEFA Euro Championship, the Portugal temporarily reintroduced border checks along its border with Spain for security reasons. The same thing was done in 2010 during the NATO Lisbon summit. And in 2010, for security reasons, Malta temporarily reintroduced border control during the Pope's visit. But there were exceptions, and they were accepted as temporary measures, and more or less they didn't cause any problem for Schengen regime. And then it came 2011. Then large numbers of North African nationals entering Italy and traveling further into the EU. Italy enabled and encouraged migrants from Morocco to travel freely around the EU rather than stay in Italy and force Rome to process them and provide for their stay. Of course, most of them wanted to reach France, and the Italian government was happy to help them. The French, in the response, the French set up unilateral border controls to Italy, which firmly Italy was furious, and only after 2 years this is a result by the changes of the Schengen border code, new Article 29, which allows internal border controls. It can, but only not more than 6 months up to the 2 years, if the EU Council of Ministers recognizes by qualified majority that there is a systematic threat to the entire Schengen zone. This flexibility put in the Schengen agreement. But then came the Schengen crisis of 2015 and 2016. It was created by a combination of 2 events. First, the migration crisis in Europe in August 2015 by German invitation to migrants, which created a massive inflow of refugees into the EU. First, Hungary to expedite the flow of the refugees to Germany, and then Austria, Sweden, and Germany suspended Dublin regulations for the control of refugees as the first point entry in the EU. After suspension and de facto collapse of Dublin system inside the Schengen area, the immigration flow affected other EU members who at the end 2015 re-established border controls on some of their internal borders. And those controls were gradually eased during 2017, but not entirely. Second event was the Islamic threat against terrorist attacks against France in Paris in November 2015, which resulted in the French government decision to proclaim state of emergency and suspend Schengen Convention for undetermined period of time for security reasons, and on the basis of Article 25, which grants internal border controls for reasons of national security up to the 6 months. Finally, we have now current crisis. In February 2020, when Italy imposed first mobility restrictions because of the COVID-19 pandemics, the EU Commission first rejected, as we heard, introduction of the internal border controls in the Schengen zone. Well, it was insufficient risk assessment of the COVID outbreak between EU and Schengen member states. The basis of Commission's decision, it was wrong basis. It was, but then what happened after the rapid spread of the virus in March? 15 EU states and additional Schengen members, Norway, Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Switzerland, announced unilateral national decisions to close their borders. Those decisions led to serious economic and social disruptions, but didn't lead to the collapse of European internal market. The European Commission was unable to prevent those unilateral decisions because the EU does not have the legal competences in the area of public health to issue orders for uniform disease control. And despite the fact that European law framework spells strict conditions for border controls, only the EU-wide recommendations can currently be justified in the area of public health. The political responsibility for limiting fundamental rights in the name of protecting human lives still remains at the national level, and risk associated with those decisions. But let's be clear, the COVID-19 represents the biggest challenge yet to the Schengen system. At the coronavirus struck, many member states closed their borders, prohibiting most travel from the neighboring countries in attempt to control infections. the effects were immediately apparent. Look at the transportation issues. Trucks and other transport means were stopped at the borders, and passengers were strained at the point entries, unable to leave or to continue their travel. With internal borders in Schengen zone largely responded in time, reopened in time for summer holidays, there is still a lingering sense of fear that they could be renewed. And frankly, something like that is starting to happen again against uncoordinated. What are the main problems? Despite mentioned problems, previous crisis or Schengen area didn't lead to new barriers and didn't stop free circulation of goods, services, and capitals and people in the Schengen area. But current crisis is more serious regarding free circulation of people and goods. There are two worrisome trends. First, the border control reintroduced as exceptional measures tends to stick. The longer these controls remain in place, they could be accepted as a new normal. And in long term, they could further erode the Schengen agreement. Second, there is danger that created flexibility of the Schengen system will induce fragmentation among member states. Following the COVID outbreak, states applied and then lifted numerous measures in an uncoordinated way instead of trying to coordinate their measures. So, current crisis clearly demonstrates the need for amending the Schengen regulations by defining clearly deadlines for those measures and justifications. If this isn't implemented, then for the future scenario for the Schengen zone might be well a repeated cycle of two actions: unilateral border closures in response to threats, and then afterwards a return to EU-led coordination effort once the threat is subsidized. This will erode and foundations of the Schengen system and commitment of the members to uphold commitment to principle of the free movement. So what can be done? First, there are a few possible changes. Needs to amend the Schengen border code by fixing time limits for reinstating internal border checks and provide clear rules on the time range in which states are introduced and lift the border controls. Improve coordination between Schengen states, especially regarding enhanced information exchange mechanism. Achieve agreement between member states regarding procedure or tools to be used in health-related checks on persons. And third, finally, member states must accept provisions of the Schengen border code without attempt to make different interpretation of those articles and provisions. Why is it important to make such changes? In the interest of the whole EU is to prevent excessive use of protective measures on the Schengen internal borders, particularly the extension of controls after the threat to public health or internal security diminishes. They will negatively affect also the public perception of European integration because despite the protracted troubles, most Europeans still recognize Schengen as one of the greatest achievements of the integration. But second, at the moment, those are possible changes. For more broader change of the Schengen agreement, it is possible only after the following measures at the EU level. First, creation of the comprehensive migration management system with real-time monitoring and single point of coordination and decision-making based on robust intelligence collection. Second, the overall reform of the European asylum system to replace the failed Dublin system. And third, the EU needs to fully develop partnership with third countries, non-EU Schengen members, UK after Brexit, Western Balkan countries, countries in the European neighborhood regarding immigration and security cooperation. And third and last, one warning. No matter what will be the scope of future changes, the Schengen Agreement shouldn't be used as an instrument for pushing further political integration inside the EU. From first Schengen crisis in 2011, there are ideas that Commission should advocate even further integration in the form of drastic revision of the Schengen rules, where the power to decide of the reinstatement of border controls would be completely in the hands of the Commission. Current Commission success in quietly extended its authority in the area of common foreign security policy indicates that there is such a remote possibility of similar attempts regarding long-term reform of the Schengen Agreement. Example of this extending Commission powers is adoption of EU maritime security strategy in 2014. Would be similar approach be possible for the future revision of Schengen? I'm not so sure. Integration in this area was started as intergovernmental cooperation, which is later incorporated in the EU legal framework. And the Schengen Agreement is still an intergovernmental agreement where the member states retain their sovereignty and the role of the Commission is limited. This means that member states will probably perceive the possible Commission attempt to strengthen its role in the Schengen system as direct threat to their sovereignty in the area of national security and probably will react very strongly. Of course, now we have a first attempt to create some kind of common understanding and framework for the future revision of the Schengen. 5 days ago, it was organized the first Schengen Forum meeting by the European Commission with goals of discussing several areas in which action should be undertaken in order to strengthen the Schengen area. There are a few proposals improving the mechanism that evaluate the implementation of the Schengen rules, possible revision of the Schengen border code, I mentioned this before, better management of EU external borders, enhancing police cooperation and information exchange, and last proposal, strengthening governance of the Schengen area through regular meetings of the Schengen Forum based on the report provided by the Commission. Yes, there is need for some kind of regular forum for the Schengen area, but how it will be organized, this is issue. So we'll soon what will happen from this initiative of the European Commission, which is intended to prepare basis for the Commission proposals which will be given to the Member States and the Council of the European Union in the mid-2021. So, I wish to conclude, those are the challenges for future development of the Schengen system and also issues to consider for Croatia as, I hope soon, new member of the Schengen Agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Baric, for your presentation. And also, I will try to mention few very important items what you say in your presentation. How to achieve balance between exposed countries on the external border and others. This is also one of the maybe the biggest challenge now for EU lawmakers. Reintroduction of the border control. This is now becoming the sine qua non question, but this is really something which need to be discussed, especially when we are having in mind the reasons for reintroduction, and also Ms. Golden-Lang talk a lot about that. Non-existence of EU responsibility for public health also can be one item for discussion. And if we look our national strategy, even in Croatia and some other country, public health and protection of public health is falling under national sovereignty. And it is also very, very important what you mentioned at the end, the Schengen cooperation and Schengen achievements are very broad, and some comprehensive research and analysis need to be done. But I will say leave that for the question and answer part of the session. So let me once again thank you all for your excellent presentation. I will give floor now to the participants. So please, can you send message or chat that I will give floor floor to you. So do we have anybody who wants to join immediately with the question or comments? Miss Francesca Stocker already have a question. Please, can you take floor, or you will wait the answer from Ms. Goldner, another speaker?
Yes, hello, good morning. I think you asked me to take the floor to repeat my question that I wrote in the chat. I would like to have an assessment maybe from Professor Goldner on how the Schengen accession of Croatia, or that might happen in the future, puts Croatia under pressure to tighten its border controls, or maybe is there also the possibility of an extra overview on how human rights are respected by police forces in the treatment of migrants? This, of course, goes to the allegations of pushbacks that are read or are written in the media. Thank you.
Should I answer the question immediately, or?
Yes, please.
Okay, so thank you for the question. So, yeah, even though these issues might not be on the first view something that is relevant in terms of the Schengen acquis and accession to Schengen, I agree with you that it absolutely is. So, and this was also something that was expressed in the Commission communication previously on Schengen and Croatia. So I would say that yes, there might be a kind of a potential conflict between this desire of the EU institutions and EU member states, on the one hand, to tighten the border controls, to control migration of third country nationals into the EU. And that, on the other hand, this could lead to more violations of asylum seekers' rights and potential pushbacks. And I agree this is a huge problem. Now, what I would like to point out is, first of all, that, the fact that you impose certain rules in terms of how you control the external borders of the European Union should in no way impact fundamental rights of third country nationals, particularly asylum seekers, and the right to an effective remedy. And if you look at the new migration pact, in particular, if you look at the proposal for the amended asylum procedures regulation, which is the one that proposes the border procedures that I talked about, it has a very thorough and elaborate framework of provisions. I think it's in particular Article 53 of the proposal, if I remember correctly, where the amended regulation, the proposal for the amended asylum procedures regulation, makes sure that member states will respect fundamental rights at the borders, in those border procedures, and the right to an effective remedy. And I think that if we talk about the black letter law, meaning the letters of law, what's prescribed by EU law, there is no problem. EU law openly prohibits any type of violation of non-refoulement principle and any types of violations of fundamental rights. The problem is the implementation. And, and this is something that I wanted to emphasize when I talked about the border procedures. If you propose a new procedure, which is so difficult to put in place, because it puts so much pressure on frontline member states, and it puts so short time limitations 12 weeks, right? Then you are making it even riskier that there will be problems in implementation, which could potentially lead to violations of individual rights. So my suggestion would be, do not propose legislation which cannot be implemented properly in practice. We have already bad experience with the Dublin Regulation and so on. We don't want something like that, which will be not feasible in practice, because then you are risking of creating more and more problems in terms of violations of individual rights. When it comes to, any types of pushbacks, I think that the EU institutions, and particularly the European Commission, has openly stated that it's very much something that cannot be tolerated on the EU side. And I think that there is, from what I see currently, a sign of a goodwill from the Croatian authorities to try and do something about it. And there is currently this idea to create an independent monitoring mechanism in order to look at what's going on at the borders. And I would like to draw a parallel with this proposal coming from Croatia and again, the Migration Pact, because the Migration Pact, the management proposal, so the proposed regulation on migration and asylum management contains within its provision the establishment of an independent monitoring mechanism, which would become, if the management proposal gets adopted, it would become compulsory for all 27 member states. And so there are a lot of questions here. How will they work? How will they be independent and so on? But generally, it's a good idea. It's a good initiative if it can be realized in practice. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Now I will give floor to Professor Pantev. He wants to react. Please, Professor.
First of all, excellent presentations by the two colleagues, Mrs. Lang and Mr. Baric. Mr. Baric reminded me about a theoretical issue which probably will be important to apply in the thinking about what I mentioned, the need to find a united EU formula in solving the issues of Schengen. And what he mentioned, it's very important that there is a relationship between the intergovernmental agreement Schengen is and the supranational nature of the Union. And we have experienced such interactions of these two legal natures of the integration community we are in during the Euro crisis, the Greek Euro crisis, when the intergovernmental relationships had to find a solution about a regime which was in trouble. Something is probably going to happen with the adoption of the EU budget in relation to our friends in Poland and Hungary. Maybe there will be an intergovernmental solution of this issue. Very probably the Schengen solution, the new ideas that are coming from many directions will have to be structured around this very, very important relationship of the intergovernmental solution that is needed related to the supranational nature of the Union. So this is just an idea to add to this excellent presentation of Mr. Baric.
Thank you, Ms. Pantev. I don't see anybody else to have question, or so I will raise one question for our distinguished speaker. We saw a lot of improvements on Schengen area from the beginning. I think that you already mentioned a single European Act which defined for freedom, then integration with Amsterdam Treaty, Schengen Border Code, etc. It is evident now that we have a strong EU legislation on this field, but we are still facing with a lot of challenges and we can say problems. But for example, the latest changes of Frontex regulation gives Frontex extended operational and strategic mandate, including the power to conduct vulnerability assessments linked with Schengen evaluation mechanism. We have common risk analysis model. We have situational operational pictures of external border. Also, a lot of new information systems are entering into place now. Entry-exit system, ETIAS system, visa information system is totally renewed and other. So what is your opinion? Now I'm asking our speaker to react maybe very, very shortly. To provide better protection of member states, do you think that more Europe can be a solution, or national bodies should keep the main role in protecting the Schengen area? To give you a short example, for example, what do you think that something like FBI can help the EU to fight security challenges? Because Europol don't have a power, for example, as international agency. What do you think? Should more Europe can be a solution? Because from the past, we learned that sometimes more Europe can give some progress in different areas. Professor Pantev?
Yes, more or less, my answer is in the frame of what I mentioned a while ago. It's the kind of formula that should be incepted, a formula between intergovernmentalism and supragovernmentalism. And it's not something that an easy recipe for that can be found. Usually, as I mentioned, a few cases, this problem arises when there are some wrongdoings or some crises or some problems. And then the intergovernmental formula comes into as a savior, as a saving belt to find solution. In the case with Schengen, we see that with the migrant issue and with the COVID type of issues, it's not the perfect solution. So there should be most probably a common European Union solution. And as you mentioned, the national body solutions or the national security approach probably should come as an exception, not as the regular regulative mechanism for solving the issues. The EU FBI, probably it will be born gradually with the functioning of the European Prosecutor's Office and the functioning of the European prosecution. It will be necessary.
Thank you, Professor. Ms. Goldner-Lang.
Yeah, so I absolutely agree with Mr. Pantev that basically the solution is not in less, but in more Europe. So I think that any type of coordination and better work at the EU level is something that can improve the functioning of the system and help us in dealing with these challenges. So there is no point to repeat what Ms. Pantev has already said.
Thank you. Mr. Baric?
Well, I'm a little bit skeptical because of my previous practical experience of work in European institutions. Why? We are talking about area of national security and foreign policy, which is still firmly in hands of the member states, and they don't wish to give any kind of meaningful transfer of the authority to the supranational institutions. And that's the frankly reason why its common foreign security policy and common security and defense policy is now in big crisis. Regarding this, some kind of European FBI, I remember in 2002, after the 9/11 attacks, there was one idea of creating some kind of European Homeland Security Department, which was rejected because there are such differences between European states about anti-terrorism strategies. You have on the one side countries like France and then UK, who have very direct counter-terrorist strategy, and then in that moment countries like Sweden, which didn't perceive this as serious danger. What happened then? Better intelligence coordination and exchange of information between intelligence and police organizations, which gave results. And frankly, in this moment, until the member states are not willing to transfer their authority in the area of national security to the supranational institutions, this is maximum we can achieve. And regarding Schengen, you see, this first set of measures is what is really possible. And I agree, there is need for some kind of formal mechanism at the European level for the future coordination, consultation of the Schengen regime. But this could be done only with cooperation of the Commission and the European Union Council as key intergovernmental body in the Union. So in theory, of course, I agree, more Europe is better, but it isn't easy to create conditions for that. And this will be incremental in step by step. And this measure, as mentioned before, is really possible at this moment. Well, if they are implemented, then we will have building blocks to build another better structure at the European level.
Thank you, Mr. Baric, and also I will give floor to Sandro.
Yeah, thank you. Let me join this interesting debate by first thanking the presenter for very inspiring presentations, and as a consequence, I have a question for each of the panelists. I will be as brief as possible. The first one goes to Professor Pantev. Are there any calculations about losses caused by the delayed accession to the Schengen area in Bulgaria? The second one to Professor Goldner-Lang. The Schengen provisions tolerate reinstitution of national border controls for the period of 6 months. While indefinite extension of this period is not illegal, is this in the spirit of the Schengen regime, and what are the possible legal and other consequences of this practice? And Professor Baric, what about the use of military in reinstitution of border control that we've witnessed in the last few years in Europe, and what kind of trend does that show? Thank you.
Well, my opportunistic answer about the calculations is that in view of the increased pressure on the Bulgarian-Greek border by migrants, we have not lost much by being accepted in this Schengen regime. It's a principle, however. As Mr. Dragovic said, Schengen is more than the issue of migrants. It's much more, and this is what matters, and this is why the European Commission, the European Parliament, and the individual governments of the European member states have reached to the conclusion that Bulgaria and Romania are due to become members. And the exception we see, it's for some domestic concerns and in domestic party and political parliamentary problems in one of the friendly countries of the Union. So no big loss for now, but as a principal issue, it's this delayed. We were expecting 2011 to have this completed. So it's the delay is the problem.
Okay, let me refer to the question that was directed to me. So the use of legal rules on and the time limits set in the Schengen Borders Code in order to indefinitely prolong the use of internal border controls, whether this is legal and whether this is problematic from any other point of view. I think that I agree with you, Sandro, that this is a huge problem, not only legally speaking, because, you know, I see law as a kind of a tool. That's the idea behind law. Law is just a tool in order to enable us to set certain policy and social goals in the European Union when we talk about the European Union and the EU acquis. And in this context, obviously, what the Schengen Borders Code had in mind in terms of the reintroduction of internal border controls for a very short time period, so that's why they are called temporary border controls, is to show that there is the understanding that there could be certain issues where member states should be authorized to impose internal border controls, but that this, once the challenge, the risk is over, this should be over and done with. The problem is when it came to secondary movements, to migration, that member states were doing it and they are still doing it over and over again. So they're prolonging this period for several years now. And who knows what will happen with the pandemic, how the pandemic will evolve. So what is the effect of this? The effect is that law is kind of used in a way to achieve certain goals, which obviously no longer match the legal text of the Schengen Borders Code. So member states will in no way accept that since they have gone over all possible extensions which are stipulated by the Schengen's border code, that they should now again open their borders and in terms of, you know, having no border controls. If you ask Germany or Austria or any state that currently has internal border controls, they would never politically accept it. So the only way to go forward, both on the side of the Commission and all the other EU institutions, it's to accept it, even though it's legally very problematic. So what would be the solution? The solution would first of all be probably to change the Schengen Borders Code and to make it compatible with the reality, which has obviously changed. And second, to try to tackle the reasons why these states are doing that. And to tackle it the right way, meaning if one of the problems is the migration influx, the solution is not just to, you know, to close all the external borders. You have to respect individual rights and the right to apply for asylum. On the other hand, you know, the COVID problem is another problem, how to deal with such a huge pandemic, whether the imposition of internal border controls is a measure that is legally speaking proportionate, meaning that the ensuring of public health of EU citizens and residents in the EU could not have been protected by less restrictive means? That's the crucial question here. And if you ask me with regard to the imposition of internal border controls, I think that those measures are proportionate. I think they do satisfy this requirement of proportionality. I'm not sure whether complete entry bans, which had been imposed by certain member states in spring this year, were proportionate. Here, I would say that probably certain entry bans, which were imposed as a reaction to the pandemic, were not proportionate, meaning that the protection of public health probably could have been achieved by less restrictive means and not by completely closing the borders. But that's another issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Iris. Mr. Baric.
Well, very short answer. Limited role in not only in border control, but also in the internal security roles. Why? Because you need to look at the way military works. Military is designed to use a maximum force for physical neutralization of the enemy. This is completely different logic than police or organization, which is geared toward the use of minimum force to preserve law and order. So also, as former member of the military organization, I know that military doesn't like those roles. Yes, military can give intelligence support, logistical support, but direct measures and using military members of the military, for that role, military forces needs special preparations. You need to retrain your soldiers. To explain them, not just explain, but give them examples how to do something which is quite different than normal military roles. I remember in 2002 in spring in Denver, I saw members of the US National Guard deployed in the Denver airport for additional security. If you look, I looked at them more closely, and so they were so insecure. What to do if something happens? In short, role of the military in border control limited, and you should pull military this role as soon as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Baric. Since I don't see any other, yeah, now I see the question. Ms. Ivana, you can ask question or?
Yes, I can repeat. Do you hear me?
Yes, please.
My question is more about the securitization process of migration. We can see in the first migrant crisis that Croatia has used a more humanitarian principle in compared to Hungary or Slovenia. So what I want to ask is, will Croatia use more securitization assess if there is a new migration crisis? And what is your opinion? Should we work more on cooperation with our countries, neighbor countries like Hungary or Slovenia?
Mr. Baric, would you do you want to answer first or?
Maybe this is better for our colleague to answer first, because it's her expertise, more her expertise than mine.
So it was a question to me, so I will try to give my perception of that. So I think that we cannot compare the situation in 2015 and migration which is trying to enter now. So I read a lot that Croatia was very humanitarian in 2015 and that today we change our approach. But my position is that in that time we were really facing with refugees from Syria, and a lot of European countries, especially Germany, invite the refugee to come to Europe and those countries. And I think that we were just like on the bus or train station. So we received the immigrants, and we organized the transportation from the east to the west. And now this is not the case. There is no free will in European countries to receive any additional mass migration flow. So now I'm not talking about the specific asylum seekers, I'm talking about huge migrants flow. And this is the big difference in what happened in these five years. Now we are talking about mostly refugees or migrants from Afghanistan, Pakistan, and even Africa, and mostly young men from 20 to 30. This is in accordance with data from Bosnia, Macedonia, and Serbia, but also in Croatia. So we are talking now about two different migration waves.
Thank you.
Do we have any additional question? If not, I don't see anything. Let me thank you once again to our panelists for excellent presentation. But I think that we open more questions than what we have answered on some questions. So I think we open the floor for new research, new discussion when we are talking about migration issues, Schengen issues, national security issues, and how to combine the principle of security and protection of people who need international protection. At the end, I want to thank Hans Eidel and and Institute for International Relations for the opportunity to give me the place to be moderator, but also for organizing this conference in this exceptional time frame of these epidemiological measures. Thank you once again, and now I will give floor to Ms. Markic Boban to give some closing remarks.
Much, Mr. Dragovic. With this, we have come to an end of our quite interesting and dynamic conference. So let me begin by thanking you, dear Sandro, for our long-standing partnership with you and with your institute, the IRMO. And let me extend my thanks to the excellent speakers we had today, Mr. Pantev, the director of the Institute for Security and International Studies from Bulgaria, our dear friend, Professor Iris Goldner-Lang from the Faculty of Law of the University of Zagreb, and to Professor Robert Paric from the Faculty of Political Science of the University of Zagreb. Special thanks go to our moderator, Mr. Filip Dragovic, with whom we have cooperated on many occasions, and I believe this is just a continuation of our cooperation. This year marks the 25th anniversary since the Schengen Agreement came into force. The idea, however, of 5 countries to abolish border controls between them goes 10 years back to the year 1985. And to this day, as it was confirmed at the first ever Schengen Forum 5 days ago, there is a firm belief in the future of the Schengen Agreement. And I believe this was also confirmed at our conference today. The European Commission has announced a new Schengen strategy for autumn 2021. I hope that by this time next year, we shall be discussing the main topic of today's conference and our joint study with the IRMO, only without the question mark. The Croatian accession to the Schengen area, a successful conclusion of a difficult path. In this sense, let me conclude with the final sentence of the Knežević study. While contemporary crises should not be underestimated, an urgent and sustainable return of the Schengen to its normal functioning and capacity to enlarge to those who are already meeting the membership criteria hardly has an alternative in the forthcoming period. In our work, the Zagreb office of the Hans Eidl Foundation will continue to promote the European idea and the international dialogue, with special focus on foreign and security policy, the rule of law, and democratic citizenship education. We shall continue to be a forum for open dialogue, and we invite you all to join us with the idea to discuss and advance the European project. Thank you all. And with this, we shall conclude today's conference. Das war's. But at least we could see each other.